record. Here we go. So just a little intro about today's class. Welcome to today. Our subject is lemons in a tree. This is one of the favourite subjects for my beginners in this class because it's just a nice little intro to doing some foliage, bit of greenery, and also focusing on getting some light and colours into the lemons and making things feel soft. So I'm going to turn everybody's sound off if that's okay. We've got a few people in the class today, so welcome to the class, and bear with me while I flip over to my other screen, and then you'll have a view of my table and what I'm doing down here. During the class, we will, what happens is I just talk and you just get to listen. And if you have any questions though, or any concerns, please don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask, because that's how we all learn, isn't it? And often the question you've got is the same question someone else has. And I know when I was in school, I was always too scared to ask anything because I didn't want to look like an idiot, but no one's an idiot, so it's okay. All right? And no question's too stupid, because sometimes I don't even know the answer, truth be told. Okay, so you're now looking down at my desk, which is very messy from this morning. So I've done a class this morning already, which was also lemons. So I've got a lot of yellow going on today. What we do the first part of the class is a little charcoal sketch. And so that's just to get us into the mood and get familiar with the picture. So I'm just going to zoom in on that. And you'll see on your notes page that I've given you, you've got a colour version and a black and white version. So the black and white version is to just show you the different tones that are in the picture. So it's just a little study, and it's a way of looking at it as a whole and looking at where the darks are and where the lights are and what's the highlight, and figuring out tones, because tone is really important when it comes to doing any kind of art, I think, especially realism stuff. And it's something that you really need to understand and get your head around, you know, and then apply in colour. So you've got to kind of convert it over into colour once you go into colour. So the first part of the class, and it's only a little 10-minute session, is to just warm up, basically. So what I like to do is have an art diary or some drawing paper here in front of me, and a couple of bits of charcoals. This is willow charcoal. It's very soft. I said Montmartre's not a great brand for most things, but it's okay for this. So you can get a little tin of charcoal for about $7 or $8. And this is lovely. It's nice and soft and it's easy to use, and it rubs off easily as well. So that's quite a good little product to have. You can see on the notes here that I've got a grid drawn up on the picture. That's just a way to help us draw what we can see, so that when we go to draw the lemons in, you can see that, you know, this side of the lemon just comes slightly over into that section of the grid, and then down through here, and it crosses over this far up inside the grid, and you can kind of figure out the shapes and where things are by having a grid on your page and figuring out where all the intersections are, and then you can kind of join the dots. So I find that a really useful way for drawing, especially things like portraits that you have to get precise. So we'll refer to the grid to get the drawing in place, and then we'll look at the black and white version to have a study of the tones, and then we'll hop on to the colour version and get stuck into that. So basically we're doing 2 drawings each class. Okay, so for this one, what I normally do is just draw up a shape of the image that I'm going to do. So it's a landscape shape. It's obviously wider than it is tall, and I just mark out what they call a thumbnail. So sometimes thumbnails are only little like that, and you could do a series of them if you wanted to kind of, you know, draw up the same scene and move things around, put a tree in, take a tree out, or whatever it is you're doing. So thumbnails are handy just to get your composition right, and it's just a nice little way to get into art mode and relax. But for this exercise, we're just going to do the one larger thumbnail, and then I'm going to do a very loose grid on here. I know that's slightly off center. I like to start off a little bit loose and not get too tight to begin with, because this is the start of art class and it's kind of when you want to get relaxed and don't get too caught up in being precise. We can do that in the next step. So first thing we want to pop in here is the lemons, because they're the main shape. And I'm now looking at my colour picture and I can see where the lines kind of intersect. I'm going to go a bit higher there. So I can see the side of that lemon intersects through there. And if you draw with me, with your piece of charcoal, I've just got a long, thin piece of charcoal to use, similar to a pencil, I guess. I'm just using the end of it. The shorter piece that we'll use after is for your shading. So I'm going to draw that through there and then just kind of follow the outline of the lemon and notice where it crosses over on the grid line coming up halfway. So it's about there-ish. So it's a little further over than halfway from the middle, about there. And then up to the top. The nice thing about natural shapes like this is they all have a distinct shape, but you know, they can be slightly not exactly perfect, because nothing is it, in nature? Everything's got its own shape. It's a bit like faces and bodies. They're all slightly different, even though they're a universal shape. So that's one little lemon drawn in. Don't forget his little tip on the bottom there. And then just loosely again, we're going to do the same with the other one. So I can see in the grid line that it starts up here at the top of my page, kind of oozes down there, crosses over my mark about there. So I'm looking at that, measuring the distance from the edge of my page into where the lemon intersects. And I'd say it's probably about 1/3 of this section. So it intersects about there and then down. And it's not as low as the other one. So the tip of that lemon comes about halfway down through this grid. So I'd say about there. So that will give us a point where to put that, and then it bulges out and it kind of joins onto the other one. And it sits inside on the right-hand side of our page, doesn't it? So it doesn't intersect that middle line going down the centre. It sits over onto the right. So just noticing those things is really helpful to help you get things in the right place. So that's basically our lemon shapes popped in. Next thing we're going to do, you can see there's a lot of foliage in there, but there's only a few leaves that are quite sharp, I suppose. Everything else is sort of blurred and off in the background. So let's draw in the couple of leaves that we can make out that are fairly clear. So there's this one at the top, and you can see that that starts in the top right quarter. It comes across your middle line, down onto the top of that little lemon, and then it comes out from the top of the page, and that comes in about halfway inside this section here. Cool. I think it sits slightly on top of that lemon, so you can bring it over the top a little bit more if you want to. And then behind that leaf, we've got another one that just sits off here into the background. And so that comes down through there. So it's significantly smaller than this main one in the front. And then we've just got a few branches. If you just notice where those little branches go and mark in those. So don't worry about being too precise and getting all the thorns and bits and bobs on them. We just want to kind of mark them in gently, gently. They kind of crisscross each other, and it's all a bit brambly, isn't it, and wild in there. And so I'm just running around the page with my eyes and marking in different spots where I can see branches and twigs and bits and pieces. Oh, there's another gorgeous little leaf between the two lemons underneath there. So that's quite lovely. We can pop him in. So all you really need to do is sort of detail on a couple of the leaves, and then all the other green bits just start to make sort of sense, and they fill the background up without, you know, having to put too much of the information in there. Okay, now we're going to go over to the black and white version. So maybe you've already gone there. I forgot for a minute. So I'm going to look at my black and white picture. Sometimes it's better to cover up the coloured one so you're not tempted to look at that one. This is just to focus on your tones. And so I can see, let's have a look at the right-hand side over here. And I've got my short, chunky bit of charcoal now. So what I'm going to do is pop it on its side and just push it around where I can see dark. And then maybe leave some areas undone or press a little bit lighter to create, you know, different tones. And so by putting it on its side like this, and this is the same way we use pastels, we're just filling up a lot more space with the dark. So just kind of draw in the shapes that you see. It doesn't have to be a thing. It just needs to be shapes. And there's little gaps of light in between some of these, aren't there? And so you can kind of leave those little areas undone and fill in the others. And I'm just going to, again, keep running around the back behind the lemons. So behind the lemons, it's darker, isn't it? Except in a couple of spots where there's a little bit of light shining through. But essentially, there's a lot of dark in behind these guys. And so that's what's going to make them pop and come forward when we, you know, put our brights and our beautiful golds and yellows in there. So noticing that stuff is important, because you've got to look at a thing and think, well, how do I bring that forward? How does that come closer to us? And how does everything else go away into the background? And it's all about tone. It's all about the colours you use, or the tones you use, and the lights and the darks. And so you can see as you move across the page, I'm just looking at foliage now, not the lemons themselves. We'll come back to them in a sec. But as you move across the page, it gets a little bit lighter, doesn't it? So it's actually not as dark on the left side. We've still got some tones and shapes and things, but they're a lot lighter. So that's when, with the charcoal, you can press a little bit lighter and just keep it sort of mid-tones rather than darks, which is also a lovely contrast, because that's now giving us a really nice composition. You know, I've got all this beautiful, rich, dark yumminess on the right here. And then as we move across, it gets lighter. So you can tell that there's sunshine coming through there, and it's hitting on the leaves and the trees, and there's background, there's probably sky and stuff showing through. You can see on the branches that one side has a little more shadow than the other, especially on this big one on the bottom left there. So there's kind of more shadow on the right side of that one, and then it's lighter. So that's an indication of where the light's coming from. And that's really helpful. We need to know where the light's coming from in order to, you know, get this to look real. And I do enjoy doing realism stuff. So just have a little bit of a wander around in there with your charcoal, where you might feel you might have gone too dark and you want to lighten it up, or maybe, you know, make something a little bit more grey. You can grab your kneadable eraser. So these are wonderful things. It's a little bit like blue tack. So they pull apart. It's like used chewing gum really, but not quite so sticky. So you can pull pieces off and you can reshape it. So you can literally draw with this into the charcoal. So if I wanted to put a few lines back in, for instance, I've made like a knife blade edge here with my finger, just knead it. That's why it's called kneadable. And I can literally just pull that across and get some really lovely little light marks through there that could be the branches or, you know, bits and pieces, and just dabbing it here and there just to create a little bit of that variation of tone throughout there. So you can use your kneadable eraser for all sorts of things. And I love it with charcoal because it's actually really great for getting the charcoal off, but it's also awesome for putting your whites back in. So if you've got a spot where you want to get it right off, you just keep dabbing it and finding a clean edge. So when you dab it, what happens is it picks up the charcoal or the pigment. See on there, it's gone all dark and black. If I put that down again now, it's just going to be dirty. So you've got to keep kind of kneading it to find a clean edge, and then you can keep dabbing. So kneadable eraser is your friend, and you can't get enough of them. And they do last for ages. You just keep kind of reworking it, pulling little bits off, and most of mine end up filthy dirty and not very pretty, but they do the job. So that's a wonderful tool to have in your toolbox if you haven't got one yet. And okay, so I've been fiddling around in there, just noticing where it's dark and where it's light, especially around those lemons, because we want the lemons to pop forward because they're so much lighter. So let's have a look at those now. Obviously we don't want to fill the whole thing in, because looking at the black and white picture, you can see that the lemons are the lightest or whitest thing, other than a few spots in the background, but they're actually very white. So what I'm going to do is just shade them lightly where I can see shadow. So this is important. This is where we want to make some impact. And you can see there between the two lemons, I'm working on the one on the right first. It's got some shadow. So I'm just going to smush a bit of charcoal in there and darken that down a tad and create some shadow in there. I still want to keep it lighter than the leaves in the back though. So this is the key, isn't it? You've got to keep kind of varying your tones. And that's why charcoal is so much fun to play with, because you can actually have so much fun creating all the different tones and greys and so forth. And this eraser is great because you can get some of it off. So noticing that it's, you know, you've got all this lovely dark foliage behind the lemons. How do we make them pop? We make them lighter. But then we've also got to add shadow and tone to give them body. And where, if you have filled in up the top where it's whitest, then just grab your eraser and take some of that out so you can get a bit of the shine back in there. You can do all sorts of things with the erasers. You can dab it like that and just sort of let it do its mottly thing so that it starts to pick up, you know, that kind of little lumpy feeling on the skin of the lemon, starting to get that effect. Kind of cool. So there's lots of different ways you can use these. And then if you check back, you might want to darken off again. So you can always go back in behind and darken off around there so that the shape of the lemon is more obvious and becomes lighter. Lovely. And then we'll hop over onto the other one and do a similar thing there. So just a little bit of shadow down underneath there. So the light's coming from above and it's hitting the tops of the lemons, mostly on the left side. So that's why we've got shadow on the right. The shadow on this guy here is from the lemon next to it. So that's a cast shadow. But when you're looking at the light and there's no cast shadows, then it's good to know which direction it's going in or coming from, because then you can figure out where to put all your shadows and your lights. So again, I can just gently push that around with my finger and soften that off. And there's a little dark tip on the bottom of the lemon just there. There's also a black spot on that one over there, so I'll put a little spot in there. And same thing, I can just dab my eraser with a kind of a flat round end and try to get some of that texture of the lemon in there. I've lost the bottom edge down here, so that means it's either got to go lighter or I've got to darken up what's behind it. So I'll just darken what's behind it so that it makes it a little bit more crisp. Wonky looking lemon, isn't he? To change the shape a tad. There we go. So that's just a very short little exercise in getting familiar with the picture, figuring out where things are and looking at the tones, and then we can move on to the colour version, because that's the fun bit. Okay, so that's good, and we're going to pop this away now and get ready for the next part. So when you've got an art diary like this, you can just shut the book and pop it away for next time And that's easy then. It doesn't get everywhere because charcoal can get pretty messy, as you know, as pastels do. I've got it all over my tablecloth here today, so I'm going to have to do some washing later. Bit of a nuisance, but anyhow. Okay, so let's get started on the next part. So first thing you need, of course, is your reference picture. I always keep that handy. I keep it nearby, sometimes even hold it in my hand and tilt it and, you know, study it from different angles. I've also got it sitting on an iPad in front of me on my desk. So that's another good way to look at your images, because you can actually zoom in and see what's going on and get more detail. And the colours seem to be a lot crisper on a screen than they are on a printout. So I like to have both options. It's nice. But normally, because I'm so used to just working off a print like this is what I normally use. And I'll go to the screen if I want more detail. So today I thought we could work on a mid-tone paper. I know not everybody has every colour under the rainbow. So whatever you have will be fine. And I found this lovely green in my drawer. I don't usually use a lot of green, but I thought, oh, that might work quite well today because we've got so much green in the background, so it's going to complement that. So the nice thing about pastel papers is you can get it in all kinds of colours, which is very, very cool. If you're working on something like a cream or a beige or a white, that's okay too, because we are going to be filling up the background today. So don't stress too much if you don't have, you know, the right colour. Today there's no right colour, it's just whatever you happen to have. I thought I'd use this up because it's a nice colour, but it's not something I use a lot. Okay, so this is colour fixed paper. It's actually quite gritty. It feels a bit like sandpaper, very fine sandpaper. And so the way that works so well with the pastels is it kind of hangs onto the pigment and you can push it all in and you can get quite a lot of layers onto it. So it's a really nice paper to work on. And it's my favourite and it's readily available. So it's at work at the art shed, so I can just grab it whenever I need some. About $2.20 a sheet, I think. So, you know, it adds up, I guess. The other nice thing about this paper is you can actually reuse it. So if you don't like what you do today, you can either get a stiff little brush like this and brush the pastel off. Make sure you're outside or somewhere because it's very dusty. So you can brush it all off and kind of push it all in and then reuse your paper. Or you can wash it off, so you can get water and a paintbrush and literally just wash it all in and start again. So you don't need to be wasting lots and lots of paper. You can always wash it in and reuse it. So I think it's worth spending the money. It's just a joy to work on and it makes life much more pleasant. So it's my favourite. I have got pastel mat as well. So that's a lot of pastel artists really love pastel mat. It feels more like a velour. And when you feel it, you think, oh, gosh, I don't know how that's going to work with pastels. But it actually sticks really well. It's really good. So pastel mat's beautiful, but it's quite expensive. So I'll stick to this. All right, so this page is 23 by 30. So it's slightly larger than an A4. And if you buy custom-made frames, then make sure you make your painting to fit into whatever the frame is. Sometimes we do something and then you think, oh, now I've got to frame it and I can't find one to fit. If you go frame shopping first and then make the painting fit the frame, you're 2 steps ahead. So it's 23 by 30. So just put your halfway line down the centre and then across the middle, whatever your page measures. You might have a different size, but you want about an A4. 11.5 is halfway. So we just want to get that grid mark in there. And I'm using charcoal. So don't use graphite pencils with pastels. They don't play nicely together. If I put graphite down on here and then try to cover it with pastel, it just doesn't stick, kind of stops it from staying there. And then you can see this silvery line through everything. So charcoal or pastel pencils are the best thing ever. And I just, if I'm on a reasonably mid-coloured paper, then my bit of charcoal is perfect for putting my grid marks and doing my drawing. If I'm on a darker paper, then I can use a pastel pencil. So for instance, a white or a light pencil, and that's easy to see too. So it just depends on what colour paper you're using, but yeah, either a pastel pencil or charcoal is the best. So I like charcoal because it comes off really easy. This paper's, as I said, it's really gritty, and when you press hard and put lots of pastel down, it's much harder to get it off. If you ever do want to remove it, sometimes we go outside the lines, you need to get some off. So if you've pressed hard and you've pushed it in, you've got less chance of getting it off completely. Whereas the charcoal's lovely and light, so that's easy to remove. Okay, so we've measured up our page. Now let's draw in these lemons again. If anyone has questions, please don't hesitate to ask. It's absolutely fine. Otherwise, I'll just keep waffling on to myself. So what I'm going to do is draw in my lemon, and again, noticing where everything crosses within that grid line. It actually comes down lower than I had it. And I have made these images to fit inside this 23 by 30 dimension. So if you don't have exactly that dimension, you might find something's a little higher or lower on your page, and that's okay. We just have to make it work. So I'm just very lightly drawing this in because I don't want to, you know, have too much of a dark mark on my paper. And I know I can take it out if I need to, but you can also leave it there and just go straight over it with pastels. You can use charcoal with pastel any old time. So sometimes if you've got trying to do a fine line or something that's small, you know, that you might want to use for in black or a dark colour, then often a charcoal is a really good option, because your pastels sticks are usually fairly chunky, and sometimes it's hard to get them to do the fine lines or, you know, into a small pointy bit, and the charcoal is often a good option for that. Okay, so I've got my 2 lemons drawn in there, and that's how they sit. And then we've got this one leaf that comes down over here. So we're just drawing things in lightly at the moment. Don't get too caught up in the detail. What we're going to do is mark in the main lines, and then we're going to block in the lights and the darks and things, and just kind of move around the picture, blocking in different areas. Lovely, lovely. I've got my branch across there, little leaf down through there. So just noticing just the things we popped in earlier. You know, there's little branches and the lines, and a couple of leaves that you might feel stand out a bit more than others because they're closer to us, so they're clearer. Oh, that stem went the wrong way. So as you can see, I'm just taking some charcoal off with my eraser, and it works really nicely on here. So lovely, lovely, easy to get off. Cool, cool. A few more little branches and things up there. They go in a few different directions. If you don't like the way they go, you can make it go your way. It's nice working with things in nature like this because you can actually, you know, change it, move stuff around. But essentially that's pretty much, you know, what we want to get in there for now. So the drawing is usually the most important part. You need to make sure that you've got everything in the right spot. And this applies more so to things that have bones, like faces and animals and hands and stuff like that. Because, you know, if you don't get the drawing right, then nothing you do is ever going to save your painting. And it applies to pretty much everything. So in this instance, the lemons are a familiar shape. It's something that most of us know what it is. And so we've got to make sure we get those shapes right. Otherwise, it's going to look like a mango instead, or something else. I think one of my lemons this morning looked a bit mango-ish. But, you know, you can't have everything. So I think that's probably enough information at this point. Just pop a bit more light on, that's better. And now it's time to look at some colours. So I didn't send out some swatches with the notes today because usually I do, but didn't get around to it. So I've picked these this morning. Now, these colours are basically what I can see within the picture. Light's a bit much, isn't it? Yeah, that's better. So what I was looking for was some dark greens. I've got my blue violet, which is my favourite dark. So I'll just find a scrap of paper and mark these out onto some paper. Move everything over a bit. Ideally, if you've got a spare bit of paper in the colour that you're going to paint on, that's a great way to determine how colour's going to behave on different colours. But I'll just do this on white at the moment so that you can kind of see where I'm heading. So I'm going to start with the darkest, and that's my blue violet. So that's my favourite dark. It's not black, it's a very dark purple, but it's a Flinders blue violet, it's called. It's an awesome colour for your shadows and your darks. Then I've got a phthalo green, so that's a really dark green, which also looks nearly black, but that's also beautiful in your shadows. Next colour I've got is red. Now I picked up red because red and green always look beautiful together, and they make lovely muddy colours. So red and green are complementary. They always work nicely, and you can make some really nice mud, sort of earthy colours with those ones. So that's that one. And I'm just making my screen a bit wider. There we go. So I've got red, phthalo green, blue violet. Then next in order, I'm going from dark to light here. Next in order is probably this one. So this is like a teal green. It's a little bit bluer. And then this is more like a leaf green or a grassy green. So it's got a bit more yellow in it. And then I've got a limey green because I can see lots of beautiful limey, sunshiny yellow colours throughout those leaves. And then I've got a couple of yellows. So they're a little bit dirty. Pastels get dirty when they hang around together, and mine are all sitting in boxes together, so they tend to pick up dirt from each other. So this is a beautiful golden yellow, beautiful warm colour. And then I've got a light yellow. This one's called Yellow A. This is an Art Spectrum Extra Soft. So the little square ones are the new Art Spectrum pastels, and they're really delicious. They're so nice. So that's a light yellow. And then I've got, this one's called Lemon Highlight. You probably won't be able to see that on the paper, but it's like white. You know, if you don't have this colour, just grab a white. I tend not to use too much white if I can help it, because I think white is sometimes a little bit too opaque, and I really like the way that a very pale yellow is a bit warmer. So that's usually what I'll try and use if I'm looking for a light. So that's my palette, basically. And that's going to be ready to get going in a minute. What I might do is we might take a, what is it, 1:35. We might take a little 10-minute break if that's okay. That's going to give you an opportunity to make sure you've got all your colours together, and I'll leave them here on the screen so you can see them, and get that drawing ready to go. If you feel like you want to rush ahead, you could start to block in some of the darks, you know the process. And otherwise, we'll come back in 9 minutes now. So at 1:45, it's 1:36. So I'll see you at 1:45. Okay. Okay, so we're ready to go now. I've just popped all my pastels into this little tray and I keep that next to me so that it's easy to find and I don't forget which ones I used um, each time I come back to my painting. So it's really handy to keep them in a separate container and not put them back in with your main collection until you've actually finished your painting. So that's why they're in there. That way I can't forget what I had. Okay. So I can see Jeanne hasn't come back yet, but we might kick off anyway and get moving. Don't want to run out of time. Okay, so let's block in some of the darks. Now that's the way I like to work with my pastel work, is to mark in the darks. And we've already done that with the charcoal drawing. So we've got a bit of an idea of where all the darks are. And I'm going to use my blue violet. So that's my darkest pastel. It's like a black, but it's got a really beautiful purple kind of background. And it's a lot warmer than black. I find black can be a little bit dull sometimes. So I've got a short stick. If you've got long sticks, you might want to break them because often a full-sized long stick, depending on what brand you've got, will be too long and it's too difficult to use on its side like this. So I usually break my art spectrums into thirds or so. That way I can just drop them on the paper, hold them flat like we did before with a bit of the charcoal, and just smush it around and cover a bigger area. So what I'm doing at the moment is just looking at where it's darkest and marking in some of the dark spots. So don't go crazy with this colour or any dark because it can kind of dominate a little bit sometimes and you don't want to make everything really, really dark. So I've got to leave room for the other colours, but I just want to block in some of my darkest areas. And so by just wiping it over the page like this, we get it on fairly lightly. The idea is to build up the layers. So I'm putting this down fairly lightly, and then as we move forward and build up the colour, we can actually then keep building up the layers as with oil paints, but we don't have to wait for it to do anything. We can just jump in and get stuck into it, which is very cool. So that's probably about all we need to block in as far as the darks go, because it is a very strong colour, and as I said, we don't want it to dominate, but it does make beautiful shadows, and it's really quite lovely when it's mixed in with your greens and your reds and things, because it's got this gorgeous violet base. So I'm going to pop that back into my box now and move on to the greens. So what I want to do now is, what I'm working towards is working on the background first and then doing the lemons last. And possibly that little leaf, this one here, that sits on the top of the lemon, we'll do that. That can be the very last one because it's sort of, I'm working in order of things. So if we do the background first, everything that's behind, then we can come in and do the next layer, which will be the lemons, and they're sitting in front of everything. So we need to make sure they can come forward and have a lovely consistent background behind them, and then we'll do that final leaf last. The reason I do that is because if you did the lemons first and then you need it to get in behind to do all the other greenery, it just gets a bit messy. And because the lemons are such a beautiful bright colour, we want to try and keep them sort of separate and not let them get too contaminated with all the other colours that we're putting in there. So that the idea is to try and leave the lemon area as clear as possible, so that when we put our yellows and whites down, they're going to be pure, beautiful colours straight onto the paper with nothing underneath. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we get the background in around the edges of them so that they have this continuous background and not a strange gap or a halo around the edges. So you do need to overlap just around the edges a little bit where you've got to put colour. Okay, so, but we'll do this together, don't stress. So let's pick up this mid green. This is my grass green. It's the mid coloured one. I've got a turquoise one, and I've got a lime one, and I've got my phthalo green. So I've got 4 greens, and you might only have a couple of greens, and that's okay. If you don't have a limey green, then you can stick a bit of yellow into your green and make it limey. So don't stress if you haven't got all those colours. it takes a while to get your collection together. And we can make things. If you need to add a bit of blue, then we could, you know, if you can't get this teal green colour, put a bit of blue into it. So it's a fun thing to do, is start mixing up some colours. So I'm going to start with this one because it's my mid green. It's almost the same colour as my paper. And I'm just going to start to block in some of that where I can see a lot of the green. And don't be afraid to kind of run over those dark areas as well. So as we said before, the right side is much darker than the left, isn't it? And so what I'm doing now is just smudging it around and looking for those green areas. Where there's darker green or lighter green or limey green, we can come back over that later and add that over the top. So we kind of really want to block in most of this side with some colour or pigment, whether it be the green or the dark or whatever. There's only a tiny little bit of light shining through there. And then as we move over to the left side, see, I'm being very loose. Just be really loose with it. And use the side of the pastel because you'll get a much bigger mark and it's a lot more natural looking. So even if you're doing the stems or the branches, just use the side of the pastel. Don't try and tilt it up and use the tip of it like you would a pencil, because it'll give you a harder mark. Whereas this is all kind of blurred and soft and wandering off into the background. So we want to keep it fairly light. We will put some light on the left-hand side. If you've got light paper, then you might be able to just let some of the paper show through and be that. Or if you're like me and you've got a mid-tone paper, you might want to add some little light pieces as we go. So I'm just literally wandering around my page with some of this green, checking out where it's green and putting it down. Even on that big leaf, even though we'll do that at the end, you can still get some colour down now in readiness. So it's all about layering, it's about putting colour down so that we can build on it. And we're going to do some blending shortly. Before we do that though, I don't know about you, but I love to put a bit of red into my green. So where I can see some shadow, so this is a red, it's quite a hard red, so you'll find different pastels will feel different too. This one's really scratchy. You can probably hear it scratching away on the paper. So that means it's quite a hard pastel, and it's drier than some. Harder pastels are really good for doing drawing kind of work with pastels. Whereas when you want to be blending and filling the paper up with with pigment, then it's better if you have softer pastels because you don't need as much to fill it up and they have less dust. But there's all different brands and different types, and if you stick with it, you'll learn about them. So I'm just popping a bit of red here and there. I really like red and green. It creates the nicest little bits of shadow. It's quite lovely. But just be loose with it. Just, blob it here and there, wherever you feel like you need to put it. Just go with your intuition, really. So I know it's looking all a bit preschool at the moment, but once we start to blend this in and get some more colour on, it'll all come together. Trust me. Okay. So now we've got green and blue violet and red on there. And I feel like I want to add a bit more dark green. So I'm going to pick up my phthalo green. So if you don't have a phthalo, just pick up whatever's darkest. If you don't have a dark green, then maybe a dark blue will do. Sometimes you've got to, improvise and just use whatever you've got. So I know we've already put darks down, but I'm putting a bit more of this down in a couple of spots because I can see there's shadow and things that I can emphasize a little bit. So it's really just a little bit like finger painting, really. You're just smooshing colours around, noticing, that leaf that sits on top of the lemons at the top there. the stuff behind it's a bit darker. So to bring that forward later on and make it lighter, let's darken off the foliage behind it, which is all just a bit of a blur really. So I love doing this, and then you can get your fingers into it and start to create. Let me know if you've got any questions. Cool. So I can see by doing that, you know, I've got most of my darks over here on the right side, and that's lovely. It feels lovely and thick and lush in there with all those beautiful leaves and branches and things. And then on the left side, it's getting lighter. There's more sky, or I don't know what's behind there, but it's definitely lighter. So now I want to get some light in there, and that's kind of the sky colour, isn't it? I'm going to go with my pale yellow. This could be a mistake. Maybe it needs to be blue. Let me think about that for a minute. Yes, I think it does. Okay, so breaking all the rules, I've chosen my palette and now I'm going to add to it. So just because you've picked out your colours at the beginning doesn't mean that you can't add other colours as you go, because sometimes you don't know what you're going to need till you get there. So I'm looking for a sky blue, something that's fairly light, you know, light blue. That will do for sky. I feel like this might be a bit too light, but I'm going to try it anyway. So this is a very light blue. I know it looks white on the paper. And so what I'm doing now is just blotching that around where I can see light. And we're going to push all this in a second and get really dirty hands. And then we'll start to kind of do more detail. Now, if this colour wasn't working for me, I can always go over it, you know, and put something else down in there. You could possibly use something with a little bit more gold in it or a bit more yellow. But I'm going to stick with this for now. See what happens. I quite like the contrast of that. And while I'm there, I'm just going to pop a bit of this limey green colour into that leaf, because that leaf's got quite a lot of light on it. So pick up your lime green if you've got a lime. If you don't, then a bit of yellow will do. And just swoosh a bit of that around where you can see those lovely limey green, shiny little bits of leaf. So many greens in the world. I just wish I could have pastels in every single green. And you never seem to have the right ones or enough. Okay, so that's nice. And so the more limey greens are over on the left as well, because they must be catching the light. So it's lovely that it kind of merges from that light side to the dark. Okay, and you just want to have loose marks, just loose blobby kind of marks. So it's starting to maybe look like something. And now we're going to get your finger, pick a finger, any finger, and we're just going to start to push it all in. I might start on the left actually where it's lighter. And as I'm doing that, I'm kind of looking at the shapes in the picture and running my finger around in the direction of those shapes. So on the top left side, you can see there's this bright sky or light coming through, and they're kind of blurred, aren't they, like a photographer does. He blurs everything in the background, so you get all these weird round shapes. So if you move your finger in those kind of directions, then it'll kind of push the pigment around into those shapes. So I'm just going really lightly and pulling it around to try and imitate the direction that those shapes are going in. So I often mention, you know, move your finger in the direction of the thing you're painting. And so it's about studying how things are and looking at them and figuring out, you know, does that go up and down? Does it go across? Is it blobby? Is it dotty? I'm going to find all the words. And working out how you can, you know, communicate that with the way you move your fingers around. So at the moment, in these little leaves on the left here in the background and the little blobs of light, I'm just doing little fat squiggly marks with my fingers and just smushing it around. So I'm going kind of back and forth, but doing small lines, not big, long, sweeping marks, just soft, gentle, round, fluffy marks, I call them. Little fluffy marks. Go back and forward and up and down and round and round. Try to keep it sort of random, because what's happening is the light's catching on the leaves and it's all kind of flickering and moving and glinting. So we want to get that kind of glinty movement going on. See how as I've blended all of that, now it's sort of merging off into the background. I haven't touched this leaf up here because that's a different gesture, because it's actually closer to us than all this other stuff that's in the background. I have got a little bit more dark than I would like in there, but I can always add some more yellow or limey green to brighten that up. So that's that side. And it's starting to look really lovely, isn't it? Quite like that. So now I want to warm it up a little bit. So I'm going to pop a bit more of this, some of this yellow in here on those light parts where there was sky, because I want some more sun. I want sunshine. And again, I can just lightly smush that around. So following the direction of the things. And they go in all directions. Some go up, some of those leaves go up and down, they're hanging down, or the branches go sideways. And the little glints of light are just all different shapes. And I'm not pressing very hard, so you'll find the harder you press, the more muddy it'll get. So if you press really hard, and this is the trouble, you start to blend and then you can't stop. But you do have to stop at some point, because the more you push it around, the dirtier it's going to get. And I want to keep this side fairly light and bright. So try not to push it in too much. And now I've pushed most of this in just softly. So it's sort of hanging onto the paper now. I haven't got any loose crumbs hanging around. And I'm looking at the limey green shapes that are there in the background. And I'm just putting a few of those in, because I just want to add a little bit more sun and a little bit more warmth through here. So trying to be kind of loose, I guess. And we're not drawing any particular shapes or things at the moment. It's just blobs of colour. And then I can gently push those in as well. So again, I'm pressing lightly. I don't want to press too hard because it'll turn to mud. If I just press lightly, softly, softly, run my finger around like that, and it just gently, gently goes off into the background, but it adds a bit more light and sunshine. That's nice. That'll do. You can overwork it. You can actually, keep putting pastel on, and then it turns to a big muddy mess, and you can't kind of add any more. There does come a point where it won't take any more. So you do have to kind of force yourself to stop. If you do, overload the paper with too much pastel and you still want to keep working on it, you can always use a fixative. So fixatives are lovely. We could spray that now. It'll set everything, and then you can build on top and keep going. I don't like to use too much fixative because it does dull the colours quite a lot. So especially the brights. So if you've got a lot of light or white or something, the fixative is going to kind of dull those colours and make them look a bit flat. Now I've just noticed on those little branches, see, I'm starting to look at detail now. These little branches that come across here, do a different green. So that's a bit green, and it's sort of closer to us but still blurry, right? So what I want to do is just mark that in lightly, pull it across with my finger, so just gently pull it that way. So it still blurs it off a little bit, but it's there. And then with my blue violet or your dark, whatever you're using, see how the bottom side of that branch has shadow? It's a little bit darker. You can tell that the shadow is towards us and it's lighter on the other side where the sun's coming. So if you put a very soft mark, very soft line, so I literally just put this pastel on the paper and literally wipe it like that around about where the bottom of that branch is. And I did that over here as well, and then I blurred it all off. And then just softly pull that around until you get this lovely soft blurred effect. But it looks like a branch somewhere over there in the distance. The secret is though, you've got to make it continue on behind the lemon, Jeannie, otherwise it will look silly. I'm just going to carry it into there a little bit further. So when we put the edge of the lemon on around there, it won't look like it's stopped just before it. There's another branch on the left-hand side. So we're kind of working from left to right at the moment. Up here, I'm using my blue violet just to get that a little darker. You can see it sort of spikes up through there. Again, just loose marks. So the pastel on its side and just pull it across to make that gentle mark. So that's the blue violet. That's my darkest. And then if I pop, I've got a bit of green. Again, it's got sunshine on the top and it's got shadow on the bottom. So make sure you kind of put your green and the dark in the right spots according to where the shadow sits. And so this one is a little bit darker than the others and it's more prominent, isn't it? You can see it much more clearly. So let's stick a bit of red in there. And pull that through too. And the red with the green just makes it lovely and warm and gives it a nice texture. There's a couple of thorns. I don't know if you want to be bothered putting the thorns on, but you can if you like. So a couple of, have to do that in a bit darker pastel. But essentially, we just want to keep this background fairly loose and focus on the lemons today. I keep forgetting we're a beginner's class, so I'm going to calm down a bit after I put some light here. There we go. That's nice. See how that just lit that up then and made it a little bit more prominent. And that was my pale yellow I used, so I haven't picked up my lightest yet. So you can kind of keep fiddling around with that, but we'll move on. Okay, so I want to do this leaf here. Now this one is not as far forward as this one, so we need to do him first. And I've already got some colour on there. I haven't pushed it in quite yet, so I'm going to start to blend that in now. And this one's quite limey green, isn't it? So it's catching the light. Oh, it goes under that branch. Didn't see that before. So this is my limey one. I really like this colour. I love lime green. It's just divine. So I'm just filling this in with a bit of my lime. I've got my other green underneath already. And I also had lime on there before too. So you can see the other colour underneath. Now, can you see the shadow on that one? So as it comes, we'll have to redo that branch now. See how it's difficult to get behind things. That's why I like to do stuff that's in the background first and then put the other things on top. So up here, just in here, it's much lighter, isn't it? You can see where the light's catching that leaf and it's kind of glowing through it. So we want to make sure that that bit there is lighter than the other part. So I can come in with my other green, which is the bluey green colour one. I don't know if that's the right green, but it feels like it might work. And darken off in that little shadow area there. And then we've got a few of the little veins and things coming through there too. So we'll put a few lines in there for those. Don't get too caught up in the detail though. You can see a little bit of red in there too. So the red with that turquoise green is just delicious. And I'm going to pop a bit of red in the shadow end of that leaf too, just for fun. And then if you wanted to shine even more, you pop a bit of the light just on the edge. So this is the light yellow, just here, to catch the light. So that's a bit of fun. And then I can just gently dab that. So different textures for different things, but now we've got, you know, a few marks and lines and things in here. If I just dab this in, it kind of grays it off and sends it off into the distance a little bit more, and just dulls that off a little. Because I don't want it to dominate, but I do want it to, you know, be there. And then if you want to pop your branch back in over the top of that one again. So it's always easier to come back over the top of something than it is to get around behind it. So I can pop that back in there just quickly. So that's a cute little leaf with a bit of gold on it. A bit more gold just for fun. And it's lost some of its detail, but that's okay. I'm not too concerned about that. So we are trying to keep this all fairly loose. So once we've got that part done, we want to move over to the other side now and start getting that pushed in and a little bit more detail possibly. We'll see how we go. So I'm going to go in here. I'm not worrying about this big leaf on the top here. We'll do that later. So if you want to push some of it in, you can, but I want to get in behind that leaf and the lemons and just start to blend some of this colour through as well. So it's the same kind of gesture or movement with your fingers. This is all blurry and soft and thick and lush, and it goes in all different directions. So if you move your finger around in, you know, different directions, just little kind of, again, little curly movements, and you'll find as you do that, you know, the dark will kind of blend with the green a little bit, and then each section that you've done will merge into the other. Now, don't press too hard, because if you do, you'll just make mud and it'll get really dirty. So what you want to do is try and keep your finger fairly light on the paper. And this, of course, depends on the kind of paper you've got too. If you find your pastels not holding onto the paper as well as you'd like, then you might need to press a bit harder. So again, yeah, depending on the paper, because this paper is so gritty, it holds onto it very well. So I can just lightly push this around and gently merge the colours, because I don't want to make a big muddy mess. I still want to have definite dark areas and definite lighter areas within all of this lovely foliage. There must be a dark bit there. When you've got your finger in a dark bit, try hard not to stick it in the light bit, because it's going to make the light bit dark, obviously, because we get stuff all over our fingers. So I've got this light bit under the lemon just there. So there's a little bit of sky or something shining through there. Now, if I keep rubbing that, it's just going to go dull and dark and lose its brightness, which is fine, because you can always come back and pop more in. But you really should try to wipe your finger off, and that's why it's good to have a little hand towel nearby that's wet on one end and dry on the other, because you can kind of clean your fingers off and then dry them, and then come back in with a clean finger and, you know, get into those little light sections there without contaminating it with your other colours. And sometimes you just need those little tiny bits of bright shining through. I feel like that's a little bit too, what I use, pale blue, so I'm just going to pop a bit of my yellow in there just to give it some sunshine. It's nice. So that's the dark side kind of blended in. And now if you want to, you don't have to do this, but if you want to kind of define a few of the things a little bit more, you can come in and just put a few little edges, you know, on things, or those branches, you can pop a bit more detail in of those so that they sort of sit on top of the darker things and come forward a bit. So we've got one branch there. There's a little leaf in this foreground here that you might want to emphasize a bit more. There's some, you know, edges and bits and bobs, little lines like that throughout there. So if you draw some of those in and just sort of define them a little bit more. So you've got that lovely little leaf there between the two lemons down in here in the middle. So that's a nice one. So we can have a bit of a play with that and emphasize that one a bit more. So what we're trying to do is get this to look as natural as possible, because the focus is going to be the lemons. Lovely. Once you've got a few marks like that on there, I might get my lime green. There's a couple of little light spots in here that we can highlight. So just a couple of areas where you can see a bit of the lime colour. Not as much as on the other side, but there is a little. And the lovely thing with pastels is you can press hard and you can get a really dark or rich colour, or you can just go super light and just get these beautiful soft little glazes over things. So see just here, I just did it on this little leaf here, so it doesn't stick out too much. I'll do this again so you can see what I mean. So what I did was, this is a dirty little pastel, but my limey green one, it's got a little edge on it, so they develop edges after a while. They end up looking a bit triangle-ish in shape. So you'll end up with these flat edges if you use them a lot. Now what I did was pop my pastel down on the edge of that leaf. So it's got a little edge here. So I popped it there and press down on the edge and then pull it upwards into the center of the leaf. But as you pull, you lift off. So you get this kind of beautiful, soft little gradual flick of color. Now, if you were using brushes, you would do the same kind of motion with those, wouldn't you? You just put your brush down and flick it up. So you get this soft little splash of colour that doesn't have any sharp edges, really. So you can actually keep things, or, you know, make things look the way you want them to, just depending on the texture or the pressure or the direction, or, you know, there's so many different ways you can use pastels. And so just by putting a few little edges like that, just like that, like it's not much, it was really simple, but it's now brought that leaf alive, hasn't it? You can say, oh, that's a leaf. I know that's a leaf, I can tell, because it's got that leafy edge and it must be catching the light. So just soft little lines that, you know, define a thing like that. And all the parts don't have to look exactly like a leaf. It's just shapes, really. Everything's just a shape or a colour or a blob of something. So let's not get too caught up in, you know, getting that exactly right. I think that's looking okay, actually. I quite like this darkness over here and merging over into the light. It's quite lovely. And, you know, back on the subject of lightening up an edge, you could just jumping back over to the other side for a sec. You could do the same thing over here on this leaf that's got the sun on it. You could come in with your edge and just pull it in gently, gently, so that it gets that little shine. I like the dark side better, actually. I usually do. Love the darks, how they all play together. So I really don't want to spend too much more time on that. I think that's looking all right for now. And, you know, as I said, it's harder to get into a background once you get your foreground in. But if you do want to come back in and, you know, add things and touch it up, there's nothing stopping you doing that, because, as I said, if you muck something up, you can easily redo it or sharpen it up or change it. I'm just going to fill this little leaf in a little bit more. Then we'll get into the lemons and get a bit of shine on those. Just going to pop a few veins in this one, because that then tells me that all the others are leaves as well. Okay, let's get into the lemons, and you start to get some beautiful bright yellow on here. So let's pop the main yellow. So like we said before, I've got a mid yellow, I've got a pale yellow, and then I've got what could be white if you don't have a very, very light yellow. So let's say white, call it white. So I've got those three tones. I've also got some red, which I'm going to use in the yellow as well. That red's very dirty. Sometimes you've got to clean your pastels before you use them, especially this one, because he's been playing in the greens and he's not very clean. So you need to wipe them off, and paper towel's usually really good for that. Okay, so let's get stuck into these. What we're going to do first off is just block it all in with the main yellow. It's also a bit dirty, but I'm not worried, it'll kind of all blend in. I'm going to put my yellow down, and this is a square pastel, so it's a nice big fat chunky one, and I can literally lie that down on my page and just run it around and press down and get some colour on there. So that's nice. And it's a little bit wider at the top than what I thought, so I'm making it a bit fatter up there. Oops. As I said, different colours and different pastels will behave differently. So some are more crummy than others. This is a bit crummy, this one. Crumbly, I mean, not crummy. Okay, and then I'm going to come over and do the same thing on this one. So just rubbing that in, getting some colour down on the page, filling it all in. So this area we've left uncovered, so that's good. It means it's going to be pure colour and nothing underneath it's going to contaminate it. You will pick up colour from around it because we've had to go over the edges a little bit to get that continuous background going on. You should be able to keep that fairly clean. So that's blocked in. Lovely, nice. Okay, so next thing we want to do is just look at some of the colours in here. Before we blend it in, I want you to notice that there's shadow. They're both touching, so one of them's got to be a bit wider than what I've done. Bring this one over a bit more. And that one can come in a bit more. Okay, so where they touch, there's shadow, but it's kind of a red colour. So I'm going to pop a bit of red in there. Now when we push that around, it's going to go sort of orange, which is nice. It keeps it warm. So remember where the light's coming from. Light's coming from top left. So the top left of these lemons are really light or white. There's also a tad of light on the top right of that one on the other side. But we've got shadow underneath, haven't we? So we've got shadow underneath and where they meet, because this one's putting shadow on that one. So I'm putting some red there, and I'm going to add some of my blue violet or purple or something as well to get the form in there. So this is all about tones. So when you're thinking about your tones in the lemons, you think, okay, there's light yellow, mid yellow, dark yellow. How do we make yellow darker? What's a great shadow colour? Or, you know, how can we change the tone of that using colour? And so I think the red is a really good option, and the blue violet will also be lovely. Might sound a little bit severe, but purple and yellow are so yummy together. So that's a bit of red in there, and we're just putting some down at the moment, like we did at the beginning behind in the leaves, just putting a little bit down. And now I'm putting a bit of blue violet just in this section where they meet. So on that bit there, there's a bit of shadow there. I'm going to pop it, and be careful with this colour, it's very strong, so you don't want to do too much, just want a smidge of it. So we don't want to turn this thing into mud, just want some beautiful shadows. So see how that purple or that darker colour is starting to kind of merge with the red and create a lovely shadow. Once we blend it in, it'll make more sense. Okay, so now you might want to wipe your fingers off or not. We'll put the light in as well. Let's pop a bit of light in up here. So I've got my light yellow. This is not white, it's pale yellow. If you don't have a pale yellow, then just pop a bit of little bit of white on, and then you might need to blend it in with the other yellow that you've already used. So that's where the light is, isn't it? Top left, right there. And there's a tad over that side too. So see how we're starting to work on the tones, and you can almost see it coming alive already without blending it in too much. A lot of pastel artists don't blend. They like to just work like this loose, and you can, and it's awesome. But I just can't help myself. I have to blend. It's a thing. Not always. Towards the end of the painting, you tend to blend less. But at the beginning like this, when blocking colours in, I like to get it all pushed in. All right, so let's work on the top right one first. My fingers are reasonably clean, not terribly, but they'll do for now. And what we want to do is kind of push this around in the kind of the shape of the lemon. So it's kind of growing from the top to the bottom. So if we kind of push this around in that direction, just do all the yellow bits first. Start at the top, work your way down. My finger's going up and down, and I'm not lifting it off the paper. So I find I get a much better consistency if I don't lift my finger up and just keep it on the paper and blend it gently. That way the colours kind of all start to merge nicely, and you don't get that stop and start thing going on and fingerprints everywhere. So I've got a lot of dust on there, but that's okay. I can tip that off in a sec. So see how by just pushing that around and pushing it in the direction that the lemon's growing. Oh, I'm losing my voice. Talking too much. So when you push a thing in the direction of it, it automatically just flows all those beautiful colours together that we put down before. And you start to create shadow and shape. This is just layer one. So if it's getting muddy and grubby, don't worry, we can come back and put more on. See how that's starting to look lovely and round now? Because of the way I'm pulling it with my finger. And as I said, I don't lift it off the paper. I might get to the top and just touch it really lightly and then come down and press harder. But I don't take my finger off the paper. If you do that, you'll be getting these things. You'll be getting that. And when you do that, what happens is you get down here, you pick up the dark pigment on your finger, come back to the top and put it in, so it all ends up the same colour. So you want to try and retain the subtle differences between the light and the dark in there. Keep it really smooth and beautiful. And where you've got the dark, so remember, I can't say the word now, remember we popped a bit of shadow here on the right side where the two lemons meet. If I keep pushing that in, you'll see it gets dirtier and darker. Now, that's not a bad thing. I really like that. Beautiful. So it's just an example of the harder you press, and I think it's a combination of the oil in your skin and all the colours underneath, and it starts to get quite dirty and grey. So you can make some beautiful muds and greys doing that sort of work. It's lovely. All right, I'm going to tip some of this dust off because it's in my way. I've got a little towel over here, which I obviously missed earlier because it's all over my cloth now. So by tipping it off, it just gets it out of the way and it means I can now keep working. So that little lemon's looking pretty good. I really like the glow that's happening on that top right, the left corner. I need to add a bit more light up here. So we'll do this one first and then we'll move over to the other one. So I'm going to put my light yellow back in here, remembering I've still got white. So I can save my white for last. I always like to save my light for last because you can't go whiter than white. So if I used that now without blending, then that's going to be the lightest I'm ever going to get. And I like to kind of keep some space for my whites. So I'll show you what I mean. When I push this in now, so see I've got another layer on here. And again, I'm just gently, gently pushing that in, and I'm keeping my finger down, and see how it's kind of merging in with everything underneath, softening off all the edges so it's blurring in with my other colours. So I put too much down in there, I'll have to darken that again, that's okay, I can do that. But see, if I had put white there, it would kind of go yellow, I guess, but now I've saved my lightest for last. I can then add that here, just showing you as an example. You don't have to do this bit yet. This is the fun bit that you save. I like to save for the last. And see how that just makes that glow, because that's my white on my lightest. So even over that, you can see it shining. And that's when you get the beautiful, you know, shiny bits that almost make you want to squint because they're so bright. So save your white for last. Save that for the final bits of light at the very end. And you'll be much happier. I'm just going to put some more yellow down in here. See how it dips down into that little tip at the end. And it's sort of lighter just on that side in there. And then I've got a bit more yellow here too. So, you know, if you think like I've got a bit too much shadow maybe, so if I can come back over this now with my base yellow that we started with and just yellow that up a bit more, then it emphasises the shadow also. And then I can pull that around as well and gently blend that in, so soften off all my edges. Again, the harder I press, the muddier it's going to be. So as you build your layers up, you want to press less hard, because then the vibrancy of the colour really sits on top of the paper and gets that beautiful glow. And it's starting to look lemonish now, isn't it? It's starting to get that lovely little bit of texture that's going on. So now I'm looking at the lemon and seeing all these little lumps in it. I don't know if you can see lumps in yours, but they're kind of lumpy and they've got dots all over them. So it's a definite texture. And let's see what happens. I'm just going to be a bit brave here. Put a little bit of tiny, tiny bits of blue violet. So this is the darkest one that we're using for shadows. But I just want to see what will happen. Hopefully I'll get some of those contours and the little shadows showing up once I push it in. So I'll put my dot down there. And I'm going to darken off again in here where these two meet a bit more. Okay, so I've smushed a bit of my blue violet just here and there. And I'm going to come back over with a bit of yellow now. Just want to get some more pastel on the paper. And just smush that around, so sort of around those areas. I want to try and create those little dips or divots or bumps or whatever they're called in the lemon. And now if I just gently do these little soft squiggly movements with my finger, because I've got a bit of pigment on there. I've got the yellow pigment and I've got a bit of the blue violet and the purple. Hopefully that's going to start to have some bumps and lumps on it. Yeah, a bit much really, but... And then if you think, oh no, I don't like that, just push it all in again. It's fun. And that's the lovely part, is you can undo stuff. You know, if something doesn't work out, you can just undo it, go over it, put something else there, brush it off, whatever you need to do. It's very forgiving and it's not permanent. So there's a few little bumps and lumps on there. I could actually make those even more prominent by adding some of this lighter yellow in a few spots where, you know, where I put those purple spots. So remembering that all the light's coming from above and the left. So those purple spots that I've just blended in can now be shadows. So if I put some light on the left and top of those, just a tiny, tiny smudge, and then push them in. So now I'm just dabbing them in. I'm not blending because I don't want to lose everything. Dabbing those in gently, gently. See how that's giving me some more and more like a lemon. Yeah, nice. So you can play around a lot with pastels and just experiment with the way you push it in or dab it or blend it, pull it, whatever you need to do. So I've still got too much dust on my page, but I'm just going to sharpen up this edge here. You need to get that nice and crisp along there. Sometimes it's really difficult to get sharp edges with pastels because they're so dusty and sandy and clunky. And that's when pastel pencils come in very helpful. So if you can get your hands on some pencils, that's really good for doing the fine lines and the edges and things like hair and fur and whiskers and stuff. Pencils are wonderful for that. So I've sharpened up that edge, but it's a bit too light now, so I've got to kind of try and match my colour with that shadow colour. And remember what I used. So now there's a bit of red, there's a bit of blue violet. Shush them in around there, and then blend them in and start to make that darker yellow colour. Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's one little lemon. I'll put his little dot back on the end there. Lost that in the process. So, as I said, it's good you can put things back in or take them out. And there's also a little dot just there. I'll put that in too. A little one down in there. If you find they're too dark or something, you can just dab them in softly. So they kind of fade a little bit. And we've got a little lumpy lemon sitting there. That's cool. And if I want to emphasize my bumps a bit more, you can keep coming in and out and back and forth and just keep lightening things up, checking the tones. And as you do that, you get to the point where you just let the colour sit on the surface then. So if I run this over some of my lemon where it's yellowest and just leave it sitting on the surface, it picks up the texture of the lemon, so it nearly looks like lemon skin because the paper has got that gritty texture, and so does the pastel. So they both work really well together to have that lovely lemony bumpy texture. Just want to brighten up this top left bit a bit more. And so that's looking nice and glowy now. And I would leave that sitting on the surface, so I wouldn't blend in the final layer because then it just keeps getting muddy and you've got to keep brightening it up. So when you want the bright bit at the very end, just tipping my dust off again, you just want to let that sit on the top. And then I can come back in with my pale yellow and just sharpen up this bright top edge because I can see there's some dust sitting on the very edge there. That's making it look a bit blurry. A few little bright dabs here and there. And I've still got room to go lighter and get my white back in there if I need to. I don't think I need to, actually, it's looking okay. And so that's that one. All right, let's move on to the next one. So we're going to do exactly the same process on this other lemon. And it's really just, again, noticing where it's light and dark. It's and we've already kind of blocked some of that in anyway with the colour. So now's the time to start pushing it in with your fingers and blending it around. So same sort of process. Pull it around in the shape of the lemon. So I'm going from top to bottom and I'm pulling it in sort of a round direction, because what I want it to do is start to look like the shape. And as you do that, as you pull, the light down into the dark and the dark up again, it will start to create that lovely round feeling, and you'll get the shadow where you need it to be. And again, I'm not lifting my finger off the paper, so I'm keeping it kind of flat on the paper. And we're going to pop that other leaf over the top at the end, so that will finish everything off. So that's a nice rounded sort of lemon. And then we can darken up the dark side and lighten up the light side, get some texture in there, and just start to have a bit of a play with that. So I'm going to pop a bit more red into here first, because I want to warm it up. It's nice and pop a bit on the other side as well while I'm there. And a bit more red down through here. And underneath there. So that's nice, and then like we did before, we can pop a little bit of blue violet just on the side, just a tiny bit. You don't want it to be too dark. A little bit of that, and then some more of this main yellow. So that was the one we used in the beginning to get the main colour down. You can see that the little knob on the end is lighter, and then it gets this shadow around it as it moves up into the body shape because it's curving out. And then we get all this beautiful yellow up through into the top, and then the top left has that lovely shine because the light's over that side. You can run pastels over the top of each other too, so that's another way of blending them. So you don't always have to use your fingers. A lot of pastel artists will say you shouldn't. But you can actually use the pastels themselves. And what they'll do is they'll do a similar thing to your fingers. They'll put colour down, but they'll also kind of merge with everything else that's underneath it. So you can start to get some really lovely effects. Nice. But because I can't help myself, I'm going to push all this in again, because I know I can still add a couple more layers before it won't take any more. So it's the same process that we did before. Just pulling it down in the shape of the lemon, so you're getting that beautiful round, full feeling. So that's starting to form some really nice shadow. I'm going to pop a bit more dark in here because I'm comparing it to the one next to it now. I'm thinking, okay, so it kind of needs to have the same sort of tones in the same areas, in the shadow areas and underneath here. And that's made some beautiful muds in the other one. You can see where those lovely muddy colours have come from mixing the yellow with the purple and the blue violet. Just, it's so nice. So good, that's all happening nicely. And then you can add some of that lighter yellow like we did on the other one. I'm just going to tip off my dust again. So we can add some of this lighter yellow just up in here. This is a big chunky stick, and they're fairly easy to use. If you want a wide mark, you can just use the end of it, or I could, take the paper off. It's probably easier. If the paper's on there, I know what it's called. So I'm just dabbing this around, running this around where I can see the light side. So that's the lighter side. And I know I can add white onto that really shiny bit there, just to give it the wow, the glare, the shine. Okay. I think my little bulb at the bottom's a bit too big or something. Just going to widen that. So as I said earlier, there's lots of things you can do to change things. If you feel like something's not quite right, you can easily undo stuff with pastels. Change something. I'll make that a little bit wider through there. That's better. And then, of course, I've got to darken that off a bit more because I just merged it all together. So it's a bit to and fro, but the thing is you get an opportunity to do that, which is lovely. So I'll put a bit more of that on there, on the side, a little bit down on the tip. And again, just softly, softly blending that through. And then, of course, this one's also got a few bumps and lumps on it, so we want to see if we can make them work as well and try to get, you know, a little bit of that lemony texture happening. I'm going to pop the white on last. I'm going to save the white for last on this one. So a couple of little bumps. It's probably not as bumpy as the other one, but just noticing, you know, there's a few little interesting shapes in there. They're only subtle, and you don't have to put them in. Doesn't matter if you don't. But I just think it makes it more fun. Push them in lightly, lightly. So little soft, squiggly movements with my fingers. I don't want to kind of dirty it everywhere. And then I can pop more yellow in around that. And that's starting to get some lovely texture now, because again, I've got to the stage where I can let that sit on the surface and just kind of do its thing and be that kind of gritty texture. There. I'm going to add a bit more light because I just lost some of it by going over it again. So again, I'm just going to let this sit on the surface. If I started to push it in, it'd go kind of milky and would lose its brightness, and I like the brightness. And a little tiny bit down here on that tip too, just on the edge there, not much, a little tiny bit. That tells us that the light's just catching on there. Tip off my dust again. All this excess dust gets annoying. The hard part's trying not to blow it off. It's very tempting, but don't do that because it gets everywhere. And now I'm going to dab my white on here. So I just want to brighten that little shoulder up right there and give it a bit of a shine. And that just makes it glow, doesn't it? Lovely. And then the final thing we need to do is that little leaf at the top there. So let's work on that guy. And then once that's done, we'll be finished. And when we're finished, we'll go back to the group screen. Not in the video, I'll turn that off before we do that. But we'll just go back, and then if you want to talk about it or ask any questions, we can do it then. And if you want to show us what you've done, I like to get a screenshot if you can with everyone's artwork, just holding it up to the screen on your computer. So I'm just marking this leaf in now at the top. So I put my base green down on there. That was my grass green. So the main green that we used before, it's mid green. It's not dark or light. A little bit of in between. Push that in, and then just looking at that leaf, I can see it's got a little vein that comes down through there. Just bring it over the top of that lemon if you can, just to sort of cover up the top of the lemon a little bit. Make it look like it's kind of sprouting out of there somewhere. Just want to change the shape. There's a little nodule on the top of the lemon as it pops up behind that leaf there. Just changing that shape a little bit. And now I'm going to put a bit of my phthalo green. So this is the dark green. We haven't used that much, but I just feel like I want to get a bit of that in there for some texture. I'm using it on its side and just lying it down and pulling it sort of in the direction that the veins are growing to try and get the feeling of the texture of the leaf. and just very lightly. So if you don't have a darker screen, then maybe try, I don't know, black or something, maybe, if that's all you've got. Or your blue violet would work, actually, that'd be quite nice. And I'm just going to dab it lightly. What I don't want to do is blend it in, because if I blend it, it'll just turn to one shade of green, and I really want to try and keep some of the dark and the light in there, so you can kind of see where the folds are in between the veins. You know how they have that little risen bit sometimes? Cool. Now what I've lost is the edge of this. So see on the, it's got kind of broken edge. So what I'm going to do is get my, no, wrong one, lime green colour, and just do this little line down through there, just to roughen up that edge, and hopefully it'll look a bit like the sun's catching it on that edge there. And you just do a soft little line, so a broken, uneven kind of line. And then if you wanted to soften it off, you could just blur it a little bit with your fingers, just give it a little dab. I've done too many lines in there. Dab it all in. And it just gave it that nice little edge. Now, technically, you could do that all the way around. I don't want to highlight the whole thing, but there is a little bit of light just on that other side there. But it's only a tiny, tiny bit of definition. So I'm just doing a very light line down through there. And then just to kind of counteract that, I'm going to put a bit of this lime green in the leaf as well. It has got a little split in there, but anyway, too late, I haven't put it in now. And the same sort of thing with the lime green as we did with the dark, just to get some of those, that veiny kind of texture in there. And just gently, gently, gently pull it across, lightly, lightly. So it all kind of merges softly, softly. There we go. So then now when you get to this point, it's time to sort of start, you know, checking the whole thing and running your eye around it and seeing where you might need to add maybe a bit more light or dark, or, you know, something else to finish it off. So I can see back in, you know, behind here, for instance, could be a bit darker, and that's going to make the lemons pop. So if I darken that off with my darkest green, that'll help the leaf come forward as well. And it'll make those lemons sing. I need to continue that up into here a little bit. Nice. Well, that was fun. And now I want to darken off down in here. So, you know, as you kind of wander around it, just find different things that you might want to emphasize or focus on a bit more. I feel like, I don't know if it's true or not, but I feel like this leaf is going to have a shadow underneath it on the lemon. I think mine's come down a bit lower than the picture. But it would make sense, I think, to have, does it, to have a shadow there? I'm just going to put it in and see what I think. A little bit of blue violet, just to bring it out on top a bit more. That could work. I'm not sure. But the thing is, and the lovely thing is, I could undo that now. If I didn't like it, I could just pop some more yellow over it and, you know, get rid of it. But I don't mind it. I think I might leave it there. So that, in a nutshell, is today's class pretty much. And I hope you've all enjoyed it, and I hope that you're happy with your outcome. So what I'm going to do now is turn off my screen share, turn off the recording, and we'll come back to the group page. I'll just make sure you pop your name on here. So the best thing to use is a pastel pencil, or a charcoal pencil, or a piece of charcoal, whatever's handy. Charcoal pencil, there it is. Love these. These are the best thing ever. This is the General's charcoal, really nice brand. Get some beautiful, beautiful products. And the white charcoal pencil is awesome. So it's actually sometimes better than the pastel pencil. There you go. So, and you could even use, you know, something like that to get some of your whites in here. So don't be afraid to pick up a pencil and have a play with that too. Okay, so for those watching the video, thank you for coming. I hope you've enjoyed the class. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And if you'd like to see your painting up on my Facebook page or on my website or in my newsletter, send it through to me when you're done. Cool.